You see that crack running across your garage floor? The one that gets a little longer every winter? The one you keep pretending is not getting worse even though you know it is? You filled it once, then twice, maybe 4 times already. And every spring it comes back wider than before, like the concrete itself is rejecting every patch you force into it. Stop wasting money on hardware store crack fillers that fail the moment water and cold weather return. There is a forgotten $1 treatment sprayed from a cheap garden pump that turns the crack itself into stone harder than the slab around it. And people in Lancaster County have been quietly using it on dairy barn floors for over 100 years without ever needing to replace the concrete. The first time I saw it done was outside Gordonville, Pennsylvania in the fall of 2019. An older Amish farmer named Amos was walking through his milking parlor carrying an old brass sprayer. He moved slowly across the concrete floor, misting it lightly like someone watering flowers. I asked him what he was spraying. He smiled without even looking up and said, "Feeding the concrete." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He was not joking. What he showed me that afternoon traces back to a United States Bureau of Standards report from 1928 that almost nobody alive today has ever read. If you already own a cracked driveway, a garage slab that looks like a road map, or a basement floor with dark water lines running through it, you need to hear this carefully because everything you have been told about concrete repair is backwards. Concrete is not rock. It never was. Concrete is chemistry, a reaction that starts the moment Portland cement touches water and never fully finishes. Tiny microscopic crystals begin growing inside the mix, locking sand and gravel together into a solid slab. But the reaction only completes about 60% before the surface dries out. The remaining 40% stays dormant for decades, buried inside your driveway, your foundation, your garage floor, still chemically alive, still waiting. Researchers studying old bridge cores in the 1990s discovered unreacted cement particles inside concrete poured in the 1950s, more than 60 years old and still capable of hardening further if exposed to the right minerals and moisture. Think about that for a second. Your driveway may not actually be finished curing. It may simply be unfinished chemistry waiting for activation. That is the secret old masons understood long before modern repair companies existed. The Amish did not learn this from a trade school or contractor seminar. They inherited it from German stoneworkers whose families used mineral treatments on foundations and cellar floors centuries ago. The mixture itself is almost laughably simple: sodium silicate. Most people know it as water glass. It is the same material once used to preserve eggs before refrigeration existed. A quart costs about $8 and can treat roughly 400 square feet of concrete. That is how a typical garage crack treatment ends up costing around $1. The process sounds too simple to be real. 1 part sodium silicate, 4 parts clean water. Mix it together and pour it into a cheap pump sprayer. Then lightly mist the crack. Not flood it, not soak it. Mist it slowly and patiently, letting the liquid absorb deep into the slab itself. And this is where old folk knowledge suddenly turns into chemistry so effective it almost sounds impossible. The sodium silicate penetrates deep inside the crack, where dormant cement particles have been sitting inactive for decades. The moment it reaches them, the reaction begins again. New crystal growth starts forming inside the concrete itself. Within about 72 hours, the crack is no longer a weak point. The empty space becomes denser, harder, and more waterproof than the surrounding slab. The crack does not get covered, it gets converted back into stone. The Portland Cement Association tested this exact process in 1952. Their reports showed sodium silicate treated concrete experienced surface hardness increases of up to 400%. Water absorption dropped by nearly 70%. The treatment continued strengthening the slab for years after application. Yet somehow, nobody talks about it anymore. No commercials, no contractor brochures, no shelves dedicated to it in hardware stores. Why? Because the concrete repair industry makes billions selling temporary solutions. Sodium silicate is too cheap, too effective, too permanent. It cannot be patented into a flashy tube with a $24 price tag. For years, contractors sold homeowners expensive epoxy kits and patch systems that looked impressive for one season before reopening. Basement injections costing $400 or more that cracked again after 2 winters. Entire businesses survive on repairs that never truly last. And most contractors are not even lying. Many simply never learned another way because the older methods quietly disappeared. Amos walked me across his milking barn floor that day in 2019. Concrete poured in 1948, more than 70 years old. Not one visible crack anywhere. I crouched down with a flashlight expecting to find at least some hairline damage. Nothing. Smooth as glass. He told me his father had sprayed the slab with sodium silicate every 3 to 5 years since it was poured. No resurfacing, no replacement, no demolition, just maintenance. One floor surviving decade after decade while modern slabs crumble in a fraction of the time. And here's the part most homeowners do not realize. This treatment works on old concrete already in place. You do not need to pour a new driveway. You do not need permits. You do not need contractors tearing apart your garage. As long as dormant cement still exists inside the slab, the chemistry can reactivate. Concrete poured in 1975 can still respond today. Even concrete poured last summer can benefit from it. The process itself takes almost no specialized equipment. A quart of sodium silicate, a cheap plastic garden sprayer costing about $12, a stiff nylon brush. Start by cleaning the crack thoroughly. Remove loose debris, sweep away dust, vacuum if possible. If old filler is flaking apart, scrape out what comes loose naturally. Then mix 1 part sodium silicate with 4 parts water. Fill the sprayer and apply a light mist about 8 inches above the crack. The goal is absorption, not puddling. Most people ruin the treatment by flooding the surface. Do not do that. Apply 1 light pass and wait 15 minutes, then another, slowly feeding the slab until it stops absorbing the solution. The concrete itself tells you when it has had enough because eventually the liquid begins sitting on top instead of disappearing below the surface. But there is another level to this process, a second treatment most outsiders never hear about. Amos called it the finishing touch. His grandfather used a Pennsylvania Dutch phrase that roughly translates to livingstone. Later, I discovered old federal engineering records describing the same thing in astonishing detail. After the sodium silicate treatment cures for several days, a second solution gets applied, calcium chloride mixed with water, the same calcium chloride sold everywhere as ice melt. 1 cup dissolved into a gallon of water. Once sprayed lightly over the treated concrete, the calcium chloride reacts with the sodium silicate deep inside the slab, creating calcium silicate hydrate crystals. The exact mineral structure responsible for concrete strength in the first place, except now the crystals form denser, tighter, and more water-resistant than before. Early engineering studies documented incredible results. Massive increases in compressive strength, water penetration reduced almost to zero, freeze-thaw resistance improving dramatically in treated slabs. Old barn foundations treated this way survived winters that destroyed surrounding structures. Think about what that means. For less than $20 in materials and a couple weekends of careful work, you can restore aging concrete using a government-tested hardening process documented more than a century ago. Your driveway becomes harder than it was years earlier. Your basement walls become more resistant to moisture. Hairline cracks stop spreading because the chemistry beneath them changes permanently. But there are details that matter. Temperature is critical. Below 50 degrees, the reaction slows dramatically. Below 40 degrees, it nearly stops. In extreme summer heat, the solution evaporates before penetrating deeply enough. The ideal range sits between 60 degrees and 75 degrees, when the slab feels cool beneath your hand. Moisture matters too. Older manuals recommended lightly dampening the concrete a few hours before treatment, not soaking it. Just enough moisture to prime the capillary structure, so the silicate solution gets pulled deeper inside. Dry concrete often rejects the first application. Slightly damp concrete drinks it in. And the second application matters even more than the first. Old reports from Lancaster County described 3 separate treatments, spaced across several days for heavily used barn floors. Some of those same floors remained sealed more than 60 years later. There were even variations in the formulas. Certain builders added small amounts of potassium silicate to increase flexibility in slabs exposed to heavy temperature changes. Amish farmers sometimes mixed compounds derived from wood ash into the solution without fully understanding the chemistry involved. Yet modern analysis later confirmed those additions reduced brittle cracking by altering crystal formation inside the slab. Now listen carefully, because sodium silicate is not magic. It cannot repair severe structural damage. It cannot stop foundations from shifting. It cannot reverse rusted rebar or fix slabs lifted by frost. Wide cracks still require filling materials or silica sand before treatment, and surfaces covered in epoxy or acrylic sealers must be stripped because coatings block penetration completely. But for ordinary garage cracks, dusty basement floors, driveway spalling, and moisture seepage caused by open capillary networks, sodium silicate addresses the actual chemistry instead of covering symptoms temporarily. That is the difference most people never hear about. The strangest part of this entire story is not the chemistry itself. It is the fact that this knowledge almost disappeared completely. Homeowners generations ago understood how to maintain concrete for life. They expected floors and foundations to survive decades. Somewhere along the way, people stopped inheriting practical knowledge and started depending entirely on products marketed to them. By the 1970s, companies began repackaging silicate treatments into expensive proprietary blends sold under flashy brand names. A material costing almost nothing suddenly became a premium product with massive markups. Marketing replaced education. Permanent maintenance was replaced by recurring repair cycles. Meanwhile, old engineering bulletins vanished into archives. Forgotten contractor manuals disappeared from shelves. The chemistry remained exactly the same, but the public stopped hearing about it. Concrete itself never changed. Only the business around it did. That is why this matters more than people realize. A $12 sprayer and an $8 quart of sodium silicate are not just cheap tools. They represent something older generations once considered normal. The ability to preserve instead of constantly replace. The ability to understand how materials actually work instead of depending on endless repair products. Before I left the farm that afternoon, Amos said something I have never forgotten. Most people spend their whole lives paying to fix things that should never have failed. And honestly, the more you think about it, the harder that sentence becomes to ignore. Because your driveway does not know about marketing campaigns. Your garage floor does not care about contractor pricing structures. Concrete still responds to chemistry the exact same way it did 100 years ago. Dormant cement still waits beneath old slabs. Cracks still spread because water penetrates weak capillaries. And silicate treatments still strengthen concrete because chemistry does not care whether the knowledge became profitable or not. That knowledge survived quietly through old farmers, forgotten engineers, buried reports, and generations of builders who refused to let practical wisdom disappear completely. And now you know it too.